Good evening. This is a meeting of the RTM's Town Government Structure and Administration meeting, better known as Tgs&A. This is October 10th, 2023. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of Tgs&A. We're being recorded on channel 79. Our technician is John Amarolis, friend of mine. Thank you, John, for all the good work with 79. We have a quorum. And we have a guest, Jack Davis, who is Chief of Finance and Budget Committee. I'd like to recognize the excellent work that our committee has done. Maine, who has agreed to share the duties of clerk, hasn't been able to share it with anybody. He continues to do it. Thank you, David. Can we briefly review the handout that you all have? First is the agenda that we work with. The next page is the minutes that we will be approving shortly. Then there's a 10-page handout, which is the heart of the matter that we'll be discussing this evening, pending changes to Appendix B of the Town Code. Followed by a page which is a one-page illustration of the areas and entities. We'll talk a lot about that, but the actual document is 10 or 11 pages long right now, and I just included this as a reminder of what that document looks like. And then the last page is a resolution that we might consider passing at the end of the meeting. So the first item on the agenda is to review and approve the minutes from our prior regular meeting of March 14th. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do it seconded?
Second.
Welcome.
Thank you,
Glad
sorry.
you're here. Didn't miss much.
Okay.
Are there any comments concerning those minutes? I would note that we learned last year from town council and wise people that it frequently happens that a person is asked to vote to approve the minutes, but they weren't at the meeting. But now we find out, because they used to abstain, but now we found out that you're only being asked to approve in that you're acknowledging that the minutes were fairly presented and outlined and available for inspection and correction. So there we are. So with that in mind, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And I think we moved that already.
Yes,
We already did. Okay, then let's vote. Yeah, we've done that. So let's vote everyone who would agree to approve the minutes. Please raise their hand. Okay, duly noted. David, I thought I saw a motion to approve, or you're abstaining?
No, sorry, I approved, yes.
Fine. All right.
I abstained because I wasn't here. Like you
Pardon
said.
me?
I abstained because I wasn't here.
Well, I was just explaining.
Yeah, I saw that.
I just explained.
Need to have been here.
You're entitled to, under our interpretation of Robert's Rules of Order and FOIA, you don't have to feel that you should abstain, but you're merely voting to acknowledge that the minutes were fairly presented and that you had a chance to review them and such. So I'll again ask for those who approve of the minutes, then raise their hand.
Okay.
Very good, it's
It doesn't
unanimous.
have to be unanimous. does it?
Unanimous.
Doesn't have to be, but it's always nice.
I think you're relieved to know that.
Even if you abstain, it's still unanimous.
Yeah, exactly. It's still unanimous.
We
but I
can
abstained.
introduce our guest.
So how do you want to vote?
Abstain, I actually didn't even
Abstain.
look at him.
Our guest, Jack Davis, Chairman of Finance and Budget.
Right.
And a matter of fact, we could have him vote if we want to.
I'm sorry,
you're not.
you're Deirdre, right?
And Gail,
Oh,
sorry.
and Gail, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
We should have little nameplates.
Right.
Okay.
I just want to get the minutes right.
It's not in the budget.
So that brings us to a draft for a topic which has been rattling around for a better part of a year, which is the revision of Appendix B to the Town Code, specifically Part 6 of it, which has to do with the duties, description and duties of the Rules Committee and standing committees. A very big thank you to the members of this committee who got this current draft underway a few months ago. You'll be pleased to see that all of your recommendations have been included.
No, they have not.
Most often your specific wording. And the handout is the consolidated version of those changes. If you would like to look at the redlined version of these changes, which has now gotten fairly complicated with so many people having their oars in this war, they were sent to you last week and were also sent to you yesterday. I'm sorry I don't have a copy of that with me. What you are reviewing is the consolidated version, incorporating a couple of months of improvements to it. And this team certainly did improve it the first time around. This whole process started last year when our colleague Jack and the Rules Committee became concerned about how various matters were presented to the RTM. F&B had been the primary committee with secondary committees somewhat passive in their research and presentations on the various matters that came before us. And in fact, as Rules then observed, there are 7 standing committees and each committee has their purview or jurisdiction over certain town activities. So the list of which committee had responsibility for which activities in town, I thought it would start with about 10 or 15 items. But by the time Jack did his research about committees, commissions, grants, departments, the list is over 100 items, over 100 areas and entities. And it was originally called the Matrix. And we still may slip and call it the Matrix, but it sounded like a 1999 science fiction film. We didn't really think that should be embodied in the town code. So it's now called, rather than the Matrix, we call it areas and entities. And that's what this is a sample page of. The code, this section of the code, was originally drafted in 1974 and 1975. It was slightly amended in 1984 and again in 2005 with minor details. But it was time to update it. There were certain things that were not in conflict with the Freedom of Information Act, but at least FOIA states it very clearly what we need to do and how a committee is run by Robert's Rules of Order. And the language was a bit archaic, so sections of that came out. There was an initial effort to enumerate for each of the 7 committees exactly which organizations they're responsible for, but there's a certain amount of dynamic in this whole thing where, for example, Great Island, that will have to be addressed, and perhaps the best way of dealing with it is to add it to the area. This is last year's version. A new version will come out in the new legislative year. But probably with certain wisdom about over 100 entities, they come and go. And so by having the Rules Committee put this list out every year, or modify it maybe a mid-year if necessary, but at least to have that list available, then the actual code that we're working on does not have to enumerate those details. And it really is a nice twist to do it. Where are we now? Last week's Rules Committee recommended that every standing committee, review this material before it comes up on the floor of the RTM for a vote. Public Works had their review last Thursday. Park and Rec and F&B will review it tomorrow evening, and Public Health and Safety will review it on Monday. We caught a break, and that the October meeting of the RTM has been canceled. There's not any significant business to attend to in October. And instead, the plan is, and I emphasize it's just a plan is if there are no significant changes to this material, there may be typos, there may be a change of a word to get the grammar straightened out. We're through all that because you all helped us get through 90% of the grammar and punctuation. But if there are no significant alterations to the philosophy of all this, then it can go up on the November agenda for the RTM and can be put into effect for the legislative year. If we miss November, of course, it's December and January of the year, a steep and slippery slope at that point with all kinds of budget meetings and such. So we really would like to position this so that it's buttoned up and reviewed by town council before the November meeting. We have kept town council advised of this as we've been going on. He's received a couple of drafts with the provision that we will provide him with a final version, the buttoned up version, so that he can review it in an official manner, but also format it nicely so that when it comes to the RTO 4, it looks like a proper resolution rather than some of the slippage that you see there. The indentation on this is not really all good because by limits of my ability in manipulating word processing. And also, there's some, maybe some discrepancies in the style book. Like there's moderator capitalized, or moderator small case. We need to look back at the other parts of the town code and make it consistent with that. So with those two caveats out of the way, I'd like to so just generally walk through this, and as we walk through it, don't hold back with questions either of punctuation or word choice, or conceptual problems, or conceptual issues. Because you'll find that as you read this a couple months ago and realized this is a pretty big change as to the way the RTM's standing committees express their purview or their jurisdiction, you know, when I look at the right word to use, over the activities in the town. It has not been, it has been a topic that the time is right to clarify that and to empower our committees to exert their responsibilities in review of different matters that come up. Not only budget, I would say especially budget, but in addition, there are other policy and procedure matters that come up from time to time.
Can I add something here?
Would you, Jack?
Sure.
We're ready to go through the material, but why don't you give us an overview?
Let me give some additional overview. What happened is that once we did the matrix, because I'm still not sure that areas and entities is going to be the title of the document. But once I did that, I started to look and realize there were some things that F&B was primary on. And this really started a number of years ago when the late Mark Thorne and I were talking about it, saying we got to rules, and rules sometimes was fumbling on who's responsible for this. And we said, wait, we should be able to determine that. So a number of years afterwards, I was able to do it. From there, I did something that I hadn't done for a while, which was actually read the definitions of all of the committees that were in this document. And I have to say, at best, I was gobsmacked. And then I showed it to Kate Bush, and her mouth dropped even more than mine did. We do not handle personnel, we do not handle the administration, even though it was modified in 2005. In Public Works, it had that they were still responsible for the incinerator in town, which was taken down in 1993. And the only reason I know that is somebody brought me an article because I was talking about this. And if you don't know where it was, and I've lived in town much longer than that and had no idea where it was, it is where the swap shop now resides. All right? So then we started with that. And having some attorneys, the story I tell is one of the first deals when I was working at Chase and we were buying a bank, and somebody was arguing about something that we should do. the Chase attorney said one of the first things you learn in contract law is read the whole blooming thing. And so I read the whole thing, and my mouth hit the floor, because there were things that were said in here that just wasn't how we operate. If we're doing Robert's Rules of Order, one of the most recent ones we took out, it said meetings with a quorum. Well, wait, there is no meeting if you don't have a quorum according to Robert's Rules of Order. Don't need to have that in. But then if you read the original line that was ahead of it, it said, the standing committee will only act upon the affirmative vote of the majority of its members at a meeting with a quorum. Well, that's not true. We act on negative votes at committees. Perfect example is, somebody else just mentioned, but when we vote on many of these contracts, we're not voting to approve, we're voting not to reject. Or, most recently in the stable lease that was taken away, 2 of the committees voted against those leases. 1 of the committees voted for, but those committees were acting on a negative vote. So we realized, wait, that whole thing is in Robert's Rules of Order, and by the way, it also says you have to do a minority report. No reason to have it in here. So we started looking at things. The other thing that I've heard, and you've seen it over the last couple of years, is that for some reason the RTM thought it shut down for November and December, which means we met 6 times a year in reality. We didn't do business. The rest of the town's doing business, and we weren't. So I was speaking to Kate, and I went with Kate and Frank, and we met with Kate just to get some input. And we realized that standing, and you've seen that we have done, we did a fire engine recently where Mac and I both reported public health and safety, but we were reporting on what the prior committee said because we were doing this in November and the new committees really hadn't been formed. But in the reality is, and this now articulates that, members of standing committees serve on that committee, providing they're still a member of the RTM, until their successor is named. That means all of our committees are still active in November until the committees are assigned by rules. So, I mean, yes, people have to get sworn in so they can vote and other things like that, but it says that the RTM can do business and we're open for business. And in fact, this November, we may have 1, if not 2 union contracts in our first annual meeting. That will be reviewed by the committees and reported on them at that time. There are a lot of other changes that were going on. The fact of the matter is that, and this is maybe a little bit of Jack Davis in there, I believe that the standing committees are separate independent groups that have the right to do research and analysis on anything that's within their scope. And under the old ordinance, if, F&B did some work with Board of Finance, well, it wasn't authorized by rules. And if it wasn't authorized by rules, F&B really wasn't authorized to do it. Or recently, Frank Olderman was doing some sidewalk analysis, that wasn't authorized. Or Adele and Patty Baumgartner are on a playground committee working with the Park and Rec Commission. Well, that wasn't authorized. Well, it shouldn't be authorized. As long as we're not taking away time from the people that work, because I'm more familiar with finance, but we're running a $50 million business in the town with 4 people, and one of them does payroll on the financial side. We've done analysis, because some of us are retired, to be able to supplement. And so there's a lot of work that's done throughout this committee. It's a very talented group of members in the RTM. And if somebody has some idea of what they want to work with and the committee agrees that they should, we should be able to do that. Also, and depending upon each of the committees, you want to be able to empower the committees to do things, but you also want to encourage people to look, if they're on a committee, on the areas that they're interested in. So by listing some of the items in what, I'm going to refer to it as adding another word, the scope of the RTM, which is listing all those things. If somebody's interested in, the 5 Mile River, maybe they're following the 5 Mile River Commission. So that allows people to do what they're interested in, and the more people are interested in it, the more work. Public Works operates that they've assigned things. It started with Mark, carried out with Monica, and then with Rolf. But they report on various areas throughout their meeting. So there may be a report on parking, or on sewer, or on drainage, or on sustainability. So that's part of what we're doing, is making the RTM into a more functioning area and allowing us to do what many of us really joined to do, which is to help the town. So that's part of the overview of what the philosophy is on what you're going to read in here. So I hope that comes across. Now
Now we'll get down to some specifics.
yeah, I did want to mention one on that. So in the original document you had, it did say that each district didn't need to put a member on each of the committees. There was enough feedback to say, no, districts want to have at least one representative there. Now, that may mean that at the night that the Rules Committee does the assignment to committees, the name of the person assigned to a committee, their name may be open, which means if I have 15 people, there's 15 potential people in a district, and there's only 13 currently, open is those 2 spots that aren't currently filled and will be filled by caucus, and those people can be assigned to a committee. So that still accommodates it, and it's a practice that's been going on for years. I'm going to go through some of these real quick. We changed how moderator was done based upon what the ordinance said to what the reality is. The reality is you ask the vice chair of rules to solicit names for the moderator. If the it by the way said that the moderator was supposed to solicit names for people who are going to be in that, but then they had to recluse themselves, but then they didn't say who takes over. So we put it to the vice chair, and we said if the vice chair is interested in that spot, then we go to the acting moderator, which we now put into the document because some vice chairs don't like running the meetings. And if those 2 are the same person or both of them are interested in being the moderator, it goes to the clerk of rules. And if the clerk, for some reason, all 3 of them want to run, because we're going to have a contested moderator, it goes to somebody assigned by the Rules Committee to gather names and go. The other thing about it, which isn't memorialized but was agreed to, is if you're going to say, I regretfully decline to run, all right, and you're doing it at the meeting, that's all you get to say. You don't get a 5-minute dissertation on why you're not doing it. And the reality is, and there's been people who have been nominated, and it was mentioned that I was nominated on more than one occasion, and when they call me up, I'm saying, thank you very much, I didn't put my name in, and take me off the list. So those people are going to be checked beforehand. So we changed that in that area. We also moved things to 3 weeks out because sometimes the Jewish holidays get in the way, and so we didn't want to lock us in there. We've also said that the Rules Committee is now responsible for the listing. It's not Jack Davis, it's not Frank Kemp, it's the Rules Committee. That's their listing of the various assignments and scope or jurisdictions. But it's the committees, the standing committee's responsibility, because that's their area that they're following, that's their expertise, to be able to say, oh my goodness, a new committee has come up, or a new advisory group, or something else and get it back to rules so it can be added, or like Ox Ridge in theory in 6 months will be closed down, so that building committee comes off the list, all right? Frank mentioned Great Island, and on this there may be a new listing that just says, you know, all committees are responsible for the Board of Selectmen. David, you served on it. Every one of these RTM committees should be following what the Board of Selectmen does in the town. I mean, other than maybe education, but even then they need to follow, because if there's a building committee for that, they need to follow that and know what it is. That was their responsibility to follow it. And Great Island, no matter how I scratched my head, I couldn't figure out for the life of me which committee is in charge of that. If it's new debt, F&B gets to introduce it, but it may be Public Works, it may be TGS&A because there's rules going on, it may be Public Health and Safety.
Public health and safety.
So,
Now, if you've been following along, Jack has got us through page 2
and 3.
and 3.
Sorry.
The heart of the matter of the change is these, on page 3, the paragraphs F and G. These are sort of what they call the whiskey and the highball, to change the force field of how the committees exercise their purview over the various activities that are on the list. I think we got the picture. Jack,
So the last part,
you want to continue with
yeah, the
page
last
4?
part in that, on page 4 is, we memorialize the fact that the RTM will follow the Freedom of Information Act and Robert's Rules. Now, we're not telling what version, because they change versions. And we don't want to be asking this committee every year to come back and say, we're now on version 13, can we have a motion to change it to 14? So that was taken out. Now,
It's the same 7 committees that we've always had. There's nobody fooling around with that. But someone suggested, well, it was a good suggestion, on page 4, there's the list of the 7 committees. Also, there might be another one of these days. So let's authorize that right now by saying the Rules Committee, and well, affirmed by the full RTM, can create a new committee.
now,
A while ago, there was 8, I think there
well, I
was
was going to ask Joe, because you've been on rules for a while. If you remember when we, instead of doing this electronically, we had that old pin board?
Yeah.
There was, I believe, they took public health and safety
8. It was public health.
and
there was
moved
safety.
public health in there.
Yeah.
So, with the understanding that there may be new, the person said, look, if we're doing this so it lasts 10, 15 years, if the town reorganizes, we should be able to reorganize the committees. And who knows, maybe a committee that should be there is a technology committee. So, since everything is so dependent upon that. So, it just says to the rules, you don't have to first figure out if you can do this. You're authorized to add, delete, or combine any committees that are over there as at your discretion, which is then approved by the
Okay.
RTM.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, go
we're kind
ahead.
of getting towards one of my questions is, do we have a provision in here for ad hoc committees? And is that something the Rules Committee should consider, whether there's some issue like the Great Island purchase where it really combines multiple disciplines, where maybe it's more convenient or more expeditious to have, you know, an ad hoc committee comprised of members of multiple committees rather than assigning like 4 or 5 committees to a
It's in there somewhere.
which is a long-term standing issue like Great Island will be.
I think it's a good suggestion, because it's in there somewhere about different subcommittees.
We
But
have,
there's really
yeah,
no
we have
specific
special
mention.
committees, but we don't have ad hoc, and we should add it.
Yeah.
As simple as that. So, this is why, this is a living document. It's not
I hate that
Frank's and my document. This is your document. This is how we, as an organization, want to run.
Jack, don't use the word living document. We've heard it so many times, and it's used by people who don't know what they're doing. So
Well,
we don't want to say living.
Well, there may be a long-standing issue like Great Island's going to be living with us for years to come. You know, issues with, you know, climate change, maybe, you know, flooding or, you know, whatever and we may decide that maybe there should be some sort of like, you know, special committee or ad hoc committee, the RTM, that should be focused just on that. in
I
addition to
agree.
standing committee.
That's why I just put it down here, because it's
Okay.
going to be added.
All right.
I'm real, there's a lot of good ideas that we've added into this that weren't ours. So, you know, it wasn't Frank's or mine.
Yeah.
It was,
Now,
this is
before
why we
we-
want a lot of other people looking at this.
Before we take a dive into the committees, are there any
Well, I-
general questions that we can
I
clear
kind of
off
have
at
an
this
overarching
point?
question. In that, you know, you mentioned town council has kind of seen iterations of this. Have we gotten them to actually take a look at what's being proposed here versus what state law requires to make sure that we're in compliance with
Yes.
the state? Okay.
yeah, he's
We
been
we
up
did
to
it, we did
date.
it on the first draft that we all
Right.
looked at. It said, here's what's gonna be on the table. This is not final, but this is the, this is what conversation I had in memo has said to him. And we promised to get him a clean, final copy for making
Yeah,
into
for
a
final
resolution.
sign off.
Just as soon as we can, so that he can do his work. We had
Right.
received no indication that we're going out of bounds.
Because I had a question with respect to the election of a moderator. Because the way this is written, we're gonna, if there's a contested race, it's gonna go to a secret ballot on the floor of the RTM, and I'm not sure that complies with FOI in this state. I didn't think we could do anything on the floor that's by secret ballot.
Well, you're
I could be
writing
wrong.
it in, you're writing it in, we've done that before when we
I know,
elect
but I
the
still,
ethics.
it still makes, well, ethics is one thing, because that has certain confidentiality rules. I used to be the chair of the Board of Ethics for a
I'm
number of
fully
years.
aware of that.
But, you know, when you're on the floor of the RTM, I thought every vote that we took as public officials is required to be public. So I'm not sure we can take, secret ballot votes even for the election of a moderator. I know it kind of hurts people's feelings and may influence people's votes because nobody wants to, you know, if there's a popular moderator and you don't really want them
David,
to
rather
continue to
than
be moderator.
agreeing to make that change, I will pledge to bring it up to town council
Okay,
and see what
Yeah,
the
I'm
rule
just
is,
not-
and then we'll abide by what he said.
right.
Okay.
It's a good question.
We could want to fill vacancies, secret ballot,
Do you? Oh, yeah, if you're doing a caucus, yeah.
caucus.
But a caucus isn't a public meeting.
District.
Well,
District
but if
caucus.
you're doing a caucus properly, you're supposed to do what the folks do in Iowa, and everyone's supposed to go to one corner of the room or another. And I know one of the state parties in this state has now changed their caucus rules so they cannot have secret ballots anymore. So you have to, you know, even though it's just a party caucus, you still have to have a public vote and make your vote known,
Well, it's,
which is what caused me to raise that question.
to add to what you're saying, when Seth asks, or the moderator asks, everyone in favor, please stand up. Well, that's that philosophy.
Right.
That you can be seen in who is voting where.
It's a public record.
Well,
It's
besides having the count
And
of
the
the
district
public
chair is
record,
taking the vote.
it's also, that whole body is seeing who's standing up and who's not. And there's been some votes that I'm knowing who's not voting at something. But the fact matter is that's very consistent with that philosophy. That's why it says, please stand up. The only one we sometimes do, where you don't have to stand up, is that there are some people who have to abstain on certain bonding issues because they work for a company that, financial, that they can't. And so if we're doing several bonds, it's just ridiculous for them standing up by themselves when it's really that. The one area that was not changed, which was the recommendation, it's on page 5, section D. It's very important that the term budget-making authority is the term that we're using. That term is used in state ordinances. And so it wasn't really so much about the budget, it was incorporating the state verbiage, because there's certain responsibilities and powers associated with budget-making authorities. And in the towns, where there are both a Board of Finance and an RTM, every town recognizes both the Board of Finance and the RTM as being the budget-making authority of that town. And so that's why whoever made that suggestion, that's the one area where we kept that verbiage in there, because the verbiage was very important, because it relates back to state ordinances. Another thing that was added, and I think this
Top of
is
page 6.
page 6, and there was some discussion about this, because we still want people to be able to do their business. It originally said that anyone in the RTM who wants to speak to town council needs the approval of the moderator. And that rules, I said, I'm going to violate that consistently. I'm not calling Seth, who could be at work, when I have an issue that I got to speak about and what's going on. And nor should, like, many of the other committees that are operating. So we wrote that with the exception of standing committee chairs, and sometimes it's a simple thing, like, all right, on gifts as an example. We just had the gift for $200,000 from the Darien Little League. In this town, in reality, there's only 2 bodies that need to approve a gift over $12,500. And that is the Board of Selectmen and the RTM. The Board of Finance doesn't have a vote. The Board of Finance is really the bookkeeper to set up the appropriation for that thing. But in the meantime, it's on theirs to vote and approve. Well, you're approving an accounting entry. So, I mean, and I'm not picking on the Board of Finance because it's something that's been done for years, but it's those type of things that sometimes, okay, if we're not paying for the money, which is actually what's going on, we're not receiving the money, but they're going to make the payment up to $200,000, then the Board of Finance doesn't need to set up an appropriation. So just to verify that, sometimes you give Wayne a quick call and you say, hey, is this going on? Now, there's work that's going to be done that I'm sure Frank is going to talk about later. If you're working on a committee and, like, you know, you get an assignment, then you don't need to, I'll mention one that we did, the bag ordinance. Everyone who worked on the bag ordinance, and certain people had roles and responsibilities, they didn't have to first go to the moderator to ask Wayne a question of what they were working on in the bag ordinance when they were assigned to go find that out. So if you're working on something and you're acting as a representative of the standing committee and other things like that, go ahead and do your work and get it done. This is to ensure that we're not using up all of town council's time. And again, having 2 attorneys in here, you know you don't need to be bothered in having billable hours going and building up, answering questions that really should be directed elsewhere. So that's part of why that was put in.
So if you had a question, I would go to Frank and have Frank go to the
No.
attorney?
No,
If we're working on an issue, for example, redistricting, or something like that.
No, I was just curious.
Once we open a channel to it, then
Then anyone on the committee can
then it's
talk to him.
acknowledged that you have activities with town council and are running up his clock.
Okay.
And so that it should be very easily done.
but if there's an issue, like, you heard something in the RTM, all right? Like, one of the questions when we talked about Great Island, somebody asked if there was a environmental study, which actually I knew there was because I looked at the finances and what things had been spent. I also knew it wasn't really a significant one, but if you wanted to see if that was open to the public, all right, you would speak to the moderator. And the moderator would either get the answer for you or give you and say, yeah, go call Wayne, all right? Which really is, you know, when you raise certain things, you actually ended up with Monica giving you an answer. But the fact of the matter is that you yourself get to have that conversation because you don't need third parties going in there, which even further builds up because maybe you have more knowledge on that topic and we're going to have a deeper conversation. But you know, there are other sources. John and I had a conversation on something where somebody had made a suggestion, and I relied on John's prior experience as a registered voter, knowing that he knew the law a heck of a lot better than I did. And so we had a really interesting conversation about something. So, but yes, we're not denying access, you just
Oh,
need
yeah,
to.
no, I didn't want, I'm
Yeah.
just curious.
So those are good
No, it's a
questions.
good question.
Now, we're up to, if you feel like I'm moving things along, I am.
Well,
We're
I
just-
mean, maybe I'm a little confused by what Jack just said. I mean,
Okay.
I just, with respect to consulting with town council, members still have to go to the moderator to request permission to speak with town council. That's the way this reads to me.
Yes, it does, but if you're working on a project, all
Right.
right? Like, you guys, if you follow rules
Mhm.
and it's on your agenda, noise ordinance is coming,
Right.
all right? So people on the committee may be assigned various things on that ordinance. You go look here, you go look here, and other things along that line. Once it's been assigned by rules and you guys on the committee are working on it, go ahead and prosper and call the town council.
Right, but I mean, the committee members should still go to their committee chair first and say, we need to talk to town council.
Yes,
I
I
mean,
would
it needs to
agree.
go, I think it should go through through the
I
committee
think,
chairs.
I
Just-
think that there are two routes.
Right, right.
If all of a sudden Howard has got some particular issue, it can go to the moderator, as it says here.
Mhm.
But it also says here that the chairs
Right. But the
can
members
do
have
it
to
as
come-
well.
But the members
So
have to
Howard
come to you
touches ba-
first.
if Howard touches base with the two, he has two routes.
Mhm.
Go to town council through the moderator, or touch base with the committee chair, and then he'll go. So I think that we're pretty well covered.
I agree with how it really should do, because there's often people will just say, look, I have a question on bonding or something like that.
Right, and they just.
And I don't
call
want
up
to get
that
in the middle of
willy-nilly.
it. Right, because, you know, I can do bonding for dummies. But, you know, that's not my forte, and, I mean, I understand it very well, but not to the level that they want to start talking to me about it. And while they educate me very well, the fact of the matter is, no, you need to, there's something that we did, honestly. So F&B decided that we got tired of the accruals for fire engines. So Jenny Schwartz and I did an analysis on what it would be to bond for fire engines, instead of having, as you know,
Right.
we did the accrual. But if the budget was a little tight, that accrual wasn't fully made. And I got a little tired about that. If you're gonna make an accrual, make the accrual. That's like you're making a commitment, like a loan payment. So eventually, we showed it to Kate and Jen, and I think Jenny spoke with bond counsel. I totally away from anything I need to be discussing, because that's a total waste of his time. But Jenny, who's in that business, can have an intelligent conversation with bond counsel. So, yes, she said it, but yes, go do it.
Right,
So-
but it should go through either the chair or the moderator, just so there's some, regulation on it and some,
I agree. I agree.
some way to turn off the spigot for town council's time.
No, I fully.
Not that I'm against a brother lawyer earning a fee.
I didn't know which side you were on. Now I know.
or
No,
sister.
but I don't,
Okay, let's,
you guys have other work to do as being counsel, so you don't
Right.
need to be bothered and distracted.
So if David, you're happy with this, we can move on?
No, it's fine, it's fine.
Okay,
Just,
so
I was a little
let's
confused
move on.
by the way Jack was explaining it, so.
What we're
I get it
on
now.
the precipice now of the 7 committees description. I'm going to jump to the last one, which was TGS&A. And we had some good wordsmithing on the 7th one, TGS&A. And it is what it is right now, and incorporated your suggestions. What is missing from the current version and this version is a indication that we're responsible for the working conditions of the town employees. And that was written into this legislation before there was a personnel department. And so I feel very comfortable having that particular provision disappear. In the markup version, you can see where that was, but it is not here anymore. To keep us out of the human resources department of the town government. Jack, do you want to make some brief remarks?
Yeah, I'm gonna say that
About
when
the
I
other
read
6?
this,
I jumped up to number 7.
I know, but you're on 6 and 7. In the old code, the only group that liaised with anybody was F&B with the Board of Finance. But that's not realistic. The Board of Education is a liaison with the Board of Ed. Planning, Zoning, and Housing has all the land use boards and commissions that they do. Public Works, we said, really is the director of the Public Works. But the reality is, they also have a report and liaise with the Sustainability Committee that's there. So there's other things, but the sustainability is, if you want to call it, in the matrix, that there's other things that are there. Plus, Public Works, I promised that I would try and say this right. Ed Gentile is an ex officio of the Park and Rec Commission because Public Works does work for Park and Rec projects. So that means that Public Works is secondary to the Park and Rec Commission because there may be some things that they do. We also was suggested that the services provided by Public Works, and it's not the Public Works Department because Public Works is a much broader area because it covers sewer, drainage, parking, and so Public Works allows it a broader area for the services, which for the most part is, snow plowing and the other things that we do. But that gave a basic overview of the departments, and there is some wordsmithing we're doing to make sure we're consistent, that all of them are following, monitoring, and reporting. And in my mind, those are 3 different things. Following is you're just seeing what's going on. Monitoring is analysis. Now, you may not need to do any analysis, and that may be your analysis. And reporting is when it's appropriate to report, or when it's appropriate to bring something forward. So, as an example, and I'm not taking a position one way or another on this, but the SSOs was decided that it was going to be paid for by the Board of Finance on how they decided, but people still wanted to have a discussion about it. And so Public Health and Safety Education and F&B organized a meeting with Dr. Adley, Chief Anderson, and others, which was a very productive meeting because you could ask different questions than you can at a Board of Ed meeting. So those are the type of things where we're trying to allow those things to occur. I'm working off of 2 documents. One shows all the markups, so I'm making sure I don't miss anything. I've already mentioned that Rules Committee members shall serve 1 year commencing upon their election, and members of standing committees shall serve until their successors are designated by the Rules Committee. So all the committees are operational and functioning until the new committee is set up. And for the most part, the same committee.
Can we go back to the functioning of the committees themselves, the descriptions?
Absolutely, let's go through.
I just, and maybe this is something that I did with Public Works. I put in one of my comments is they should be a liaison with the Director of Public Works, because that's when I was chair of the Public Works Committee, and what I've seen happen since then is the Public Works Director comes to multiple meetings and discusses what's going on with Public Works, and I know the same goes on with PZ&H, the same goes on with Parks and Rec. Shouldn't we have in here that, these committees have direct access to the department chairs?
Here's a problem,
heads?
here's not a problem, but here's the issue. The Public Health and Safety has a commission. Planning and Housing has a commission, blah, blah, blah. But you don't have a commission for
Right.
Public Works.
No, I get that.
And to anchor our committee, we anchor it to the director, who has overall purview of that big, major department.
The
If
answer
we start
is,
to enumerate, well, if you were to try to enumerate on that list of 100 items, you'd wind up with a big salad. They are enumerated.
My only concern is that we're somehow shielding these directors of our departments from RTM, direct RTM discussions by not enumerating them in here.
It is enumerated in the matrix,
Mhm.
because all the departments of which they're responsible, and at a much finer level, I mean, it really goes down, you've seen, remember, if you go to your budget book in the Board of Selectmen, and I apologize if I'm speaking out of turn, I know, Joe, you also, but how the budget book is currently done, and it had all those departments, every one of those departments is assigned to a committee. So you do have direct access, and I fully agree. Adele does work with Pam.
And you work with Kate, with
I work with
FMB.
Kate and
Right.
Jim, yeah. And quite honestly, the only one that really gets, and Jeremy shows up at the meetings and other things like that. The one that gets really a little bit hectic to put everybody in there is when you get to public health and safety. Because you have the fire commission, you got the police commission, you have Chief Anderson, you have the various, I've said this
Fire
before,
chiefs.
I refer to them as the heads of the three families. And they know that I refer to it as that. But you also have Ally, and you have the person who's running the senior center, and then you have youth commission, youth groups that are going on. So that one it's easier to go to the department, and they do interact with them.
Mhm. Well, maybe there needs to be a provision in here that the chairs have, access to the department, directors.
I hear what you're saying.
Something like that, just so that the directors don't have to say, it's not my job, it's not in your code, I don't have to do it.
I think that's a good point, because when Frank and I were doing the blight, going through all that, we called Jeremy, and he really helped us out with direction on where to look, where to go, and some understanding that I didn't have, and neither did Frank. And I thought Jeremy's meeting was productive.
And we had access to him as a department head,
Yeah.
but also as the commission,
Yeah,
because he's on that commission and was able to provide us
he had a lot of insight.
information.
Yeah, he's very good.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate.
There probably
to
should
have
just be a
him.
catch-all in here, and I don't quite know where
I
it is,
think
but
we
we're doing
put
this
it
on the
up
fly.
in the top area
Mhm.
that deals when we, which before H, which says that we do FOIA and Robert's Rules of Order, we do that. Now, there is an exception to that. And it comes when we get to budget. Because what happened is that a number of years ago, there was a decision, and I don't remember if you were on the board or not at the time, all right? But if I look at budgets, it's the superintendent's budget until the Board of Ed approves the budget. And then when they approve it, it's the Board of Ed's budget until the Board of Finance approves. And then when they approve it, it comes to us in the RTM as the Board of Finance's budget, which is why F&B, for the most part, does the introduction of the budget, but not necessarily the detail. What was happening is people were end running on the town side, because it's really the town administrator's budget. I mean, with input from the first selectman, I don't want to diminish whatever they did, but it's the town administrator's budget until the Board of Selectmen approves it. And so what was happening is, if Kate, and I'm just going to use Kate because it's easy than saying town administrator all the time. If Kate created that budget, Kate should be able to answer any question that's being raised by anyone on the budget. And if there's a question that Kate can't answer, rather than running to the department head from the RTM, the Kate has to get back to the RTM. So I would say that yes, you have access for the normal things of going on. I mean, on some financial issues, F&B actually has called Pam and said, look, we don't understand how this was created, can you just let me know? Or the same thing, I made a mistake one time to question how Jeremy came up with his fees. And it was a mistake, because after he showed me the analysis that he did to determine down to how many pieces of paper we use for each one of these things, and
Yeah,
and other
sure.
things like that, and how detailed it was, I now know, okay, I don't need to see your backup on this, you can just tell me what it is. But that was an ongoing thing. During the budget though, even F&B and the Board of Finance are supposed to go back to the town administrator, or we go, in the Board of Ed side, we go to the chair of the Board of Ed, who then delivers it to the superintendent, but it's really the superintendent's budget. So I agree with you, but we have to say, except for budget. Because I don't give, in the Board of Ed side, I'm not giving somebody who deals with curriculum a call to say, I'm curious about why it's 40,000 versus 20,000. So that's the only thing, because we'd like to keep that
I mean, that could just be a
mechanism
catch-all provision. The committee, standing committees will have reasonable access to the department chairs or department heads
I like that word.
upon request. You know, something along those lines. You know, just to make sure that if there's a question, if there's an issue, you know, if there's a new project going forward, that they'll come and explain it to the committee, because the committee has to go explain it to the RTM, and that's really a natural process. The department heads want to come to the RTM, they want RTM support, so they need to come to the standing committees, but, you know, I think it's just
But I think
good-
it's
good
important to
practice to have it.
memorialize
Right.
those type of things in the document. And Frank, I believe it's in that first part where, you know, we're giving some definitions of what the standing in that, and put it in there as something that's there. I think it's a very good point.
All right, we're on the home stretch here. And before we get into the home stretch, any of our silent majority have questions or sort of check stops here, because I don't want to finish up and then say, okay, we're done. You know, so we're almost done. Are there some things that have come up so far that you don't feel comfortable with?
Well, I want to add one more thing before we get there.
Yeah, we're not through yet. We're
Okay,
getting
go
close.
ahead.
No, I just had a question. In listening to Jack when he presented before, should there be something in the RTM, in this document, that says how to start a new committee? I mean, does the Rules Committee say, I think we should have this committee? Can someone suggest it? What's the process if we wanted a new committee? How would it be presented? Who would approve it in the RTM? Is there anything that...
The rules would have to, it's either going to be one of two ways.
Okay.
Because it does say rules at its discretion, which means either somebody comes to rules, or rules itself says, you know, again, health used to be separate. Well, I think this is too much now, so I want to push it back out again, you know? So
Shouldn't
it's,
that be in here?
no, it does say here
Oh,
that the Rules Committee at its discretion
okay.
Page
can,
4.
with subsequent approval by the full RTM, but it really doesn't need the word
Okay,
full.
I was just
by
wondering
the
if there should be
RTM.
I
something.
think, John, if you're afraid that rules would go, maybe be on
No,
some
no.
rogue project.
No, let's say a member of the RTM that knows about something that, like technology, I think that's a great committee.
Well,
first
say,
of all.
let's say a committee on climate change, let's
All
take
right,
for
yeah,
example.
climate change,
Bring
technology.
up the rules, passes through rules, it here says subsequent vote of the RTM.
Okay.
So rules can't go rogue and
No,
put
no.
up a committee.
No, I'm not worried about rogue, but
I'm just
I'm
looking for
understanding.
I'm just looking for a process.
It seems
I've
to
always
me
looked for process.
The members of the Rules Committee are known, and if, as an RTM member, I said, you know, I think we need X, you can send to them saying, per this provision of your discretion to add a committee, consider it. Now, what rules does, who knows,
But all you have to do, and you're right, but you ask for it to be added to the agenda. That's all you need to do.
Okay.
And
add to the agenda
of
of
the Rules Committee. And then
Yes.
you can say, what, which isn't that difficult.
I'm sure, I don't,
I can't imagine it's that difficult. But
All right,
then,
answered your question?
Yeah, I was just looking for
Good,
language.
let's continue.
yeah, the language is there.
I've always been process oriented, so I don't see a process for that, so that's the reason.
Yeah, no, the process is that they do it, they need the support,
Okay,
and they can add, delete, or combine.
okay.
So, but yeah, and I'm using technology, and if the technology one comes up, it's not my fault.
You know, the
But
technology is coming up more and more. On page 8, Jack has already, page 8, section 4, I think we already covered that as far as the committees surviving. The committees don't go out of business. They're populated by members until the new member comes in.
I actually had an issue with section 4, and maybe I'm just, maybe it's just paranoia or.
David,
just-
you're doing your job.
Or
Come
just
on,
mischief.
bring it
you know.
on.
Well, it's the second sentence, that members of the standing committee shall serve until their successors are designated by the rules committee, which suggests that rules basically can pluck us away from any committee they want at any time without our say-so or committee say-so. And I know it hasn't really happened in the past, but
So
there's,
maybe it just references the earlier paragraph that talks about the annual appointment.
You're out at the organization meeting.
Right.
okay. I mean, once you're on a committee, you ought to stay on unless,
Yeah, I'm sure that was the intent.
okay.
Good point.
Yeah, but
To reference
if you noticed, I'm real quick to add something.
Yeah.
All right, now that's good.
I mean, it's like, this has to be our document, and if there's a concern,
make it clear.
I mean, you could see some
Yeah.
really contentious issue coming up in town, and there's
we
some
took
person.
out some contentious things that were in there from the past.
Right.
It's,
But you can see someone on a committee, or maybe a group of people on a committee that the rules committee may be thinking is causing trouble, so let's get them off of that committee and put them in a backwater.
yeah, our position
You know.
on TGS&A is always under threat, so I think it's.
Well said.
But,
Right,
no,
so-
I do think that adds some clarity. It's
Okay.
not, I mean, what we don't have in here, but now that you're raising it, is that there have been instances where somebody's on a committee and they go, OMG, I really don't want to be on this committee, can I switch mid-year? And the answer has always been no. You're on for a year. The only time I've seen rules potentially discuss whether or not somebody who's been a member coming off, there's two instances, is if their attendance is poor, and then you have to do it. But that being said, and I don't know if you actually remember this, long before I rejoined rules, there were two members who were on public PZ&H. And it was the time when we were talking about affordable housing. And one of the members was the vice chair, and they were removed. And the other person was removed, both of them in favor of affordable housing, as my belief was, for being non-qualified, even though they actually were a P&C land use
Rules
attorney.
committee decision or rules committee decision or
The
that committee?
district made a recommendation to remove them, all right, from that committee. And I was not in that district, and I fought to add those two people back. One of them, and they were even though they had pretty much assigned, two people for every, the decision is that in that district they would have 4 because we added them back because, in my opinion, they were improperly removed, all right? One of them returned to that committee. The other one chose not to return to the committee, did not run for the RTM, and ended up being the vice chair of our P&Z commission. So I do understand your concern. I
Well,
don't
that
know,
was-
are you aware of who the other person who is?
I think I know at least one of them you're talking about who
Okay,
was
fine.
denied the PZ&H position and went on to become a P&Z commissioner.
Yeah, but the other one should be close to home.
But that also raises the issue about reappointments and re-upping every year. I mean, we have this kind of this unsaid rule that, you know, you have seniority, and if you've been on a commission or a standing committee for a number of years, you can stay on, but, you know, that rule is sometimes honored in the breach, such as what you've just been discussing. Should we put something in there about that, about how what the decision-making process is in terms of being reappointed to a committee or getting on a committee in the first place?
I don't know. I will tell you, I had a suggestion that said that you serve on a committee for 2 years. So in other words, if I'm elected, if I have somebody new being elected and they're on F&B, they're on F&B for the next 2 years. You know, it's
So
just,
their RTM terms. I mean,
Yeah, yes,
yes.
yes.
Also, there's another proposal a few years ago where we did the research of what the effects of term limits would be for committee leadership. It was such a third rail issue that it just derailed a whole lot of other stuff. And I say on a practical matter, I would like to champion this material as is without bringing that stuff in. In effect, term limits, because it seemed to be a dead duck last time.
Yeah, I'm not so much concerned with term limits, it's
Well,
just about
exactly.
what,
no, I
you know,
understand.
what are the qualifications or the standards for being on a committee and for being reappointed to a committee?
It was always
I'm
been,
going to a little sleight of hands here. Notice I
Okay.
have nothing up my sleeves. But I will say that's the assignment is really the purview of the
just,
division, the department, the
The
district.
Well, the district
It's
is doing,
really,
I mean,
it's a district, district comes to, you remember this.
Well, for the rules
district comes to
committee-
rules with their slate.
but not for the standing
And
committees,
rules
we all
approved.
just put in our own, like, individual,
Rules
like,
You
No,
will
but
not play back the tape. Rules doesn't
Yeah.
really fiddle with, other than in a constructive, helpful way for new members. But the rules doesn't fiddle with the recommendation of the districts.
but with respect to standing committees, we all put in our preference sheets, and I thought that just goes to rules, it doesn't go to our district chairs.
no, it only goes to your
Goes to
district.
Oh, okay.
Some people on
Oh,
rules
And there's a lot
want,
of constructive work within the
Okay.
district to keep people happy. And so as we meet as rules, District 3, District 11 makes up their recommendation. They may have Mr. Open,
Right.
because you don't have everybody elected who they need, they'll be filled in by caucus later on. But it seems to work without acrimony or hand wringing or anything.
Right.
I will say that
Okay.
some people ask, assuming that there's 50 people elected every time, that some people like to get 50 sheets of paper from everybody else, whether or not it's electronically or not. And I'd rather play a Wordle thing than look through things outside of the district of what's going on. But things also change. When I first joined the RTM, there was complaints that you couldn't get on F&B. You know, it was like the hardest committee to get on. Now, you know, we went, and one time we had 17 members. But, you know, if you look at the history of F&B, as I mentioned to several of the people, many of the F&B members go to the dark side. They end up on the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance. So, you know, gotta keep them being generous.
Because we
So-
work people too hard.
Yeah,
Here, what are
right.
we doing here? We might as well get ourselves promoted.
We tend to, I mean, it's kind of funny, when Rob Cordone was vice chair of F&B, and we were talking about him running for the Board of Finance, and I said, it's a lot of work, but we could agree, it's a heck of a lot less meetings.
Mhm.
So F&B probably had the most meetings of any committee. And there is a lot of work that's done. So people who have good financial background just either don't have the time at that stage of life and other things like that. There is one other thing that I did want to mention, is that we kept something in that seemed to have gone away. F&B is supposed to assign 1 or 2 people to each of the other standing committees as a financial liaison. Now, without knowing that that existed, and I'm not getting political or anything, I'm just saying what happened. Based upon a very raucous budget session one year, Jay-Z and F&B and I set up the buddy system, which partnered F&B with the Board of Finance people that were looking at various budgets, because I'd rather that the Board of Finance knows what we're going to do on things that, you know, like contingency, I was after for a long time, their contingency. It wasn't anything new. For 4 or 5 years I've been talking, even when Jay-Z was there. He knew I kept on trying to bring that lower. But if there's something new that we're disagreeing on, the Board of Finance should know that a group disagrees with this when they're voting on their budget. So the philosophy that we now have, at least while I'm chair, but that may only be, you know, till November, is that F&B should be able to vote on the budget 10 minutes after the Board of Finance votes on it, because we've been able to exchange your ideas. Now, the next step was to incorporate the other operating committees into the buddy system. So when we look at it now, we have a representative from the Board of Finance, we have a representative from the F&B committee, and we have a representative, let's say, from Park and Rec, or from that. And they go out and talk about that budget and develop joint questions and other things like that. And then they all report back to their various groups on what the decision is. That was in here, that F&B was supposed to do that all along. So we have kept that in, because the more that we're all communicating and raising concern, and that's not to say the committees don't have different purviews. You know, Education Committee and F&B look at that budget differently. And so, and I'm not saying which one's right, but we look at it differently. So, but we still work together with the Board of Finance to try and come up with that, and then bring that to the Board of Ed, or in cases to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, we have at least 2 more items to mention before we,
But that was on
before we
page 9.
run off the end. Jack, I know that you wanted to get to an 8:30 meeting, and you're already late for that.
Yeah, I'm not going.
You messed that up.
I already told them.
I'm glad if you stick with us rather than running away. On middle of page 9, there's the phrase, "The moderator may attend any meeting or executive session of any standing committee." We know that freedom of information, the moderator, anybody can attend any meeting. We started off by making it clear that the moderator can attend. And then we realized that, well, committees do have executive sessions, and how executive should that be? And we just made it clear that the moderator could be a part of those executive sessions. It's a little bit of an icing on the cake here, but we felt that it should be mentioned.
Yeah, there's something else, because we did take some things away from the moderator. It said that the moderator assigned committees to items. And that's not true. The Rules Committee does that. But we still said the moderator can, in the absence of the rules. So should there be an emergency meeting, or something like that, where we have to call a special meeting, then the moderator can say, you guys and you guys have to figure out this because we're meeting in 48 hours and we need a report. You know, no different than the Board of Selectmen had, you know, if somebody, what was the term when somebody was acting?
Acting first selectman.
Yeah,
The first
yeah.
selectman was out of town or something.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that was, we continued that, but really you were saying rules is responsible for assigning items to committees.
And I'm not really sure that any of our standing committees have gone into executive session in the last couple of years.
Oh, we have on,
Education, man.
we
Fair
did
enough.
on, no, there were a lot of executive sessions on Great Island.
Fair enough.
And
Fair enough.
in fact, on some of them, because I had already been there and I was attending their
Okay.
meeting, Monica said that I could join that executive session on like PZ&H to hear what their concerns were versus F&B's concerns.
So anyway, that last paragraph could be entirely pulled out because the FOIA covers it, but we figured it would be a little bit better to just spell it out and leave it in there.
No, with the addition of executive committee meetings, you probably need it there.
It's just-
Yeah, it was for the executive.
And then that leaves us with part, section 7, which is a topic near and dear to committee clerks. And what we've learned within the last couple of weeks is that there's no such thing as draft minutes. Wow. And that is an explanation from the expert up at Connecticut FOIA, who very patiently explained that minutes are minutes. The minutes that David is preparing and will get on file within 48 hours.
7
Of the
days.
minutes.
No,
And that's
it's
draft
7
minutes.
days, 48 hours for your vote, 7 days for your
Okay.
minutes.
Yeah. So they're the minutes, period. And so at their next meeting, like we did this evening, we asked for any corrections or additions to the minutes. And if there weren't, well, then that's fine. If there were, then they need to be recorded in this meeting's minutes of what the corrections to last minutes were. Clear enough? So we spelled it out here. And people may not understand what they're reading, but there's a sort of sea change here. We don't have chairmen of committees anymore, we have chairs. So we just have to get the swing of it. And soon we don't have secretaries. There are a couple of secretaries floating around.
Oh.
And soon we'll get rid of secretaries and make them clerks. So this is just something that we needed to,
No, that was something.
we needed to spell out. First of all, in publishing of.
Just my question, currently, are we supposed to send the minutes to the moderator as well as the town
No,
clerk?
well,
Yes,
Oh,
should.
darn, I haven't done that.
neither have we.
So I'll do that this week.
As a courtesy, yeah, as a courtesy, now we know that the town clerk sends it to the moderator, but this is a
Sends
way
the
of
agendas and
I
the
just have a
warnings,
question.
not the minutes.
To go back to the sentence on the moderator, I just wonder if that description, may attend any meeting, et cetera, is consistent with prior practice, or is this the court codifying what was not codified, or I just wonder.
I think
I don't think
that,
we're memorializing what we used to do. We're saying this is the way we should do it
No, I
going
understand, no,
forward.
I just was curious.
If we-
that-
if
I
we
think
took
that-
out-
And before, there was this dispute, not dispute, but it's confusion about draft minutes. And so we decided,
No, no,
we
no,
learned
no, I
about
know
it,
what
we
you're
got
saying.
into it.
The moderator may attend any meeting or executive
Oh.
session, or, because I've never,
I'm going back, you're going back to that.
Yeah.
I
Go
think
back to
that
that.
to make it consistent with the fact that anybody can attend any meeting that they want, maybe we should just say the moderator may attend any executive session.
if anyone, any voter or RTM member can attend any committee meeting, then I would say, but executive session might be different. So
Right,
then-
and that's so,
Then it should maybe just say the moderator.
So Harry, you're recommending that we narrow this down?
No, I
think
just
it's a good
want-
suggestion.
I
Well, do
agree.
Because if it's,
It's really so that they can attend the executive session.
Right.
And that was the purpose. So that there was no
Standing
question.
committee, special committee, or advisory commission, I mean, any of those, I suppose, could have executive sessions.
Only, yeah, but this is only for the RTM standing committees.
Right.
I mean, to get into some of these executive sessions, it was easier to get into Fort Knox.
Well, you know, Jack, what we could do is to say, well, it does say executive session of any standing committee, so that,
Yeah, but
that
just
language
say,
is there. But
so we just take out the front part of the meeting and just says the moderator
Yeah.
can attend any executive session
Yeah.
of any standing committee, and it accomplishes what we
Special
want.
committee or advisory, I don't.
Advisory committee are set up by the board of selectmen.
No, we can have
No,
an
we can have
advisory committee, we can, should say,
Commission.
no, we can't go into commissions, but what we can do is, and this goes back to what David was saying, it does mention that the rules can set up an advisory committee. So we should say that the moderator can attend any executive session of any standing RTM advisory or, and because I like it, ad hoc committee.
Yeah, this says commission.
What?
This one, it says it here, commission.
Advisory
Advisory
commission, maybe what should
Well,
that?
No, it shouldn't be.
draw your attention to the words there, the advisory commission is there already.
Yeah, we should, that should really be committee.
Committee, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have commissions.
Yeah, thank you.
I
Thank you.
confess I missed it.
But yes,
Alright.
I would agree, providing we also add the ad hoc, because that says any RTM committee, the moderator can attend an executive session. That's really what we were trying to get to. So if we have to blow it out a little bit but contract it, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a good suggestion. Because that did get to us.
Now, I thought your question had to do with section 7. So, we got that straightened, we got the
I-
executive straightened out. Now we're looking at the very last, it has to be page 10.
Well, I do want to talk about 7. There is a lot of discussion, and Joe, you were there. We believe there needs to be a reference in the original minutes that are submitted from the prior meeting that says, these minutes were amended, all right? Because many of us go back, at least on the old system where we could find minutes of prior meetings, would go back to prior meetings, and if you're just going to that and you don't know that that minute was amended in the following meeting, you'd never know. So if there has to be someplace, you know, these minutes were amended, just a reference there in meeting XYZ, so that there's what I would call in my financial, there has to be an audit trail someplace.
So the suggestion at Rules Committee, when this topic came up, was that they go through some software adjustment, you know, rule flag, these have been amended, and it may cut, which seemed to be a pretty complicated thing to do. The workaround may be that, say, if we did have amendments this evening on that prior meeting, that we would submit the prior meeting minutes again to Krista, and those would be up on the web. with
As an
notation,
exhibit to the
as
current
amended.
minutes.
A footnote that these have been
Right.
amended.
Yeah, that's what we want, is a
Right.
little thing that says this is amended at this meeting, because, you know, anybody who does research in that,
Right.
you want to be able to follow.
So where is
things
that in
down.
here, though? That's not in
No,
these.
No, it's not in 7,
Right.
and
Is it
we're
anywhere
having a
here? I
lot
don't
of
think I saw it.
difficulty getting that done.
What we're
And-
talking about is procedures within the town clerk's office of what
And
needs to be done.
before we bring this to the full RTM, and not because I don't have anything else to do in my life, I will be calling the state FOIA and saying, you know, I understand the law. I think the term that I used in the Rules Committee is, if that's the law is an ass, because that's not proper. So that there has to be some method to indicate that something was modified at a subsequent meeting. So I'm sure they know how to do it. And, you know, then they can come back and say, yeah, this is how you reference it.
Yeah, you have to call them amended minutes. I was on several state committees, and if we amended something, they were presented as the amended minutes, so that that audit trail was there.
Yeah,
It was clear that they were amended, and we went down and actually put in the amendment.
yeah, but we were told at the gentleman that those minutes are the minutes of the meeting that was submitted. The rest of us would have called that draft minutes, but there was no draft minutes. Versus approved minutes, which might have had the amendment, you know, plus at the next meeting, you also have the motion to amend the minutes accordingly to blah, 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 which is seconded and voted on. So we have to figure out, based upon what we were told in that presentation, and
Dates.
and how this thing works, because, you know.
Well, I mean,
I'm
the
backing
problem is
those minutes
the
often.
process has been, at least in the past, was that when you amended minutes in a meeting, they were reflected in that meeting's minutes. So you need to create a new document, which is the amended minutes of the prior meeting, and file that.
Yep.
Or you have 2 minutes there.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have the
So
meeting,
Yeah.
and then you
But-
have as amended.
is that gonna be something we're gonna put in this code of ordinances, or this appendix, or? is
Right
this- did we
now-
just-
Personally, I believe we said what needs to be said.
Right,
What we've just been talking about are procedures within the town clerk's
Okay.
office.
all right.
Yeah, we had, Joe, you were there, that was discussed by several people, you know, Seth, Lois, and several other members all said, no, you know, we need to be able to know that the meeting that I'm looking at where something occurs, that there was something amended in there.
Right,
They say there's some minutes are doing that anyway.
Yeah, I do it.
Some committees are making it obvious that they've been amended.
Yes,
Version back or whatever.
yeah,
When
I
you look
have.
them up online.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, you have somebody who's being marked absent, and they were there.
Yeah.
right,
It's as simple as that.
right. So Frank, it sounds like there's gonna be another round of this draft coming to us before the November meeting?
Here's what I think will happen.
Right,
Okay. If you looked ahead in the package, I'm pushing for us to have a resolution tonight saying that we recommend that the RTM move forward with, approve this amendment.
but I don't think we can if we're gonna see another
And what,
draft.
and what our procedure would, if we do that tonight, so we don't have to meet again, is that I pledge that when these different old when our changes, and I've made note of 6 of them, are applied, I will send them out for you all to verify that we got it right. That's not a meeting, it's a consultation with you all individually, consistent with FOIA. We probably will do that with the other committees so far, because I have respect for the committee structure and the obligations that we all serve as volunteers, rather than to force all the committees within the RTM to meet again on this specific issue, especially when this is a year-end topic, which is disconnected from any other business that the RTM has to do. It's of interest of getting this thing in, not rushing it, and we caught a break because the October meeting didn't happen. So we're now into the November timeframe with plenty of time to circulate the drafts, get it over to town council, and get the job done. Now, we all can vote. I'm in favor of doing what I just described. But this is a democracy, and if we all vote to have another meeting, then so be it.
So Frank and I have worked very well on this document. There are certain areas where we disagree. This is one of them.
we have 3 other committee meetings to go through.
Right.
I don't think they are
No,
gonna
we
be
have
as-
more than 3.
as-
We
I don't think they're gonna be as thorough as
We
this
have
one was.
5 other committee members to go through. This is where we disagree. Because you have a lot of other things coming down the road, it'd be nice to get this off of TGS's plate so you can move forward. The term that I use is, I'd rather get it right. I didn't care if it went in the October meeting. I pretty much said I didn't think it was going to be ready for October. We're doing November because we're already doing something else and it gives us a good target. But if we do it on the state of the town, I'm more than happy of doing it there. I want people to have an opportunity to look at this, comment on it. The answer is, everyone will get a second set of eyes on this, in some cases a third set of eyes, because this document we have here, there may be some other wordsmithing that's done, because there's some things, whether or not we're using the term, instead of saying areas and entities in purview, someone suggested that it's the jurisdiction of the standing committees. And some people felt jurisdiction might have been too strong of a word. So the word that is now being potentially put forward is the scope, because we want it to be all encompassing. So, yes, the answer is you're going to get another view.
My question is, we're primary on this, right, Frank?
Secondary. Oh,
We're
excuse me,
secondary?
excuse me, no. We're solo.
Solo, okay, but we have 5 other committees who are gonna review and comment on this?
We've already met with-
Everybody is.
So I don't think we can vote on this until we get all their comments in. I mean, I'm hoping, we could do a meeting before the November meeting, like that night or the night before. but-
Help me game, I'm not opposed to this.
No, I mean, I was
but
just thinking-
Help me game out when we submit it to Wayne, and then when we give him, to be fair, a chance to format it, and get it back into a nice format for the Rules Committee meeting 2 weeks before the
I just
November
don't see
meeting.
how we vote until we hear from these other committees that they're gonna have substantive changes.
No, right.
We need
okay,
to
no, our
consider
pledge,
those, right?
If we play back the tape,
Okay.
play back the tape, and
Sorry.
so that if the changes are substantial,
Mhm.
we won't press to have it into the November session. If there are constructive
Incidental.
wordsmithing, as we've been doing this evening, it is felt, and some good suggestions come in from the other committees, they can be accommodated. And the issue moved forward, the Rules Committee 2 weeks prior to, I wish I had the date of it.
Right.
But 2 weeks prior
16th.
to the November.
Oh, I don't know that, but the 16th is when it's currently proposed to
Right.
go that. I will say, David, I
I
agree.
mean, I don't wanna be a word
No,
nerd because, we've been here for
I
a long
agree
time
with you.
doing this.
I don't know that
but-
you're voting on this, and I'm not sure. It's kind of strange, because you guys are responsible for ordinances, and I actually think that as being responsible for ordinances, you should be the most powerful committee in the RTM, because this town is driven by ordinances, not by financial budgets. So this is a very important committee. I think that if you guys are going to be primary, because really it was Jack and Frank work on this. So I don't know that F&B is assigned to this. We haven't taken it as if it was, an ad hoc committee of 2. But I don't think you can vote until you see the final document if you're going to be the primary one presenting.
Well,
I mean, I
given
tend to agree.
you have this partnership here, and he says,
I don't want to be a
he wants
troublemaker.
another round of this. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have another round on it, and I'll call a meeting prior to Rules Committee, prior to the RTM.
Yeah, we're not asking the
And
other
we'll do
committees.
it. I have an inclination, I want the thing to move forward, because I want to get off my plate, because I know we have something else coming down the pipe that we'll have to be working on soon, next year. But all that considered, I don't even think we have to
I
with
just
a
think, I
sense,
mean, this, in a
with a
certain-
sense of the meeting. Is there anyone in favor of moving forward with this resolution tonight? Seeing none, then the little resolution that I had in the package would have been our vote to present to the RTM that we recommended that this be passed.
I mean, I'm in favor of the ordinance and the proposals we've made, and I think the changes we've talked about are good.
That's what
I
we
just think
wanted you to
need-
vote on.
Well, I know, but I think we need to see the final language before it goes to the RTM. I have a
think,
problem
Okay.
with doing that.
I mean, I have immense respect for your collective experience. but
Even if we disagree
I
with each
could
other.
imagine, no, but in a certain way, this is like the charter for how the RTM is gonna work. And there may be people in the RTM who have been through things and like, oh, this doesn't work for me, or it just needs a little tweak. So I would say, send this out as, I don't know, preliminary, whatever you wanna call it, and let people in the RTM look at it, saying, this is being looked at now. If you think, you know, if you have incidental
And
whatever.
we are,
So here's
the
the
mechanism,
approach.
excuse me, Jack, the mechanism for doing that is exactly by having committee meetings, which are more structured, and just spreading it out to the RTM. But by having it discussed at each committee meeting, then we know that everybody will be exposed
I
to
have
it
never
in a working
in my-
environment.
Sorry for cutting you off. I've never in my work environment sent a draft document out to everyone saying, go look at it and make comments on it, without understanding what the preamble and the thought process was for why it's coming forward. So that is why it has not been distributed. And in fact, we have a ruling that this isn't even, because it's a working document, that it's not even to be on the website until such time that it's ready to go, and that's from Wayne, until such time that it's ready to go to the RTM. Because the only ones who vote on this is the RTM. We don't need input from any other group. But so we're trying to do more structured by meeting with people, taking their input. The next two, you know, they may not get this, but when we're going with Park and Rec and F&B, the changes that we got here tonight will be mentioned at that meeting. And then by the time we get to public health and safety, all those will be incorporated, so they get it. So like,
We-
the document that you guys saw
In
today
order
is
to
pretty
make
much
sure that
going to be going
everybody
out.
did,
Oh, no, I agree, I
Okay.
agree with the sentiment.
we could have used
Totally
the
agree.
district structure and had the district leaders call it
Oh,
and
yeah,
talk
no, I
it.
agree, it
But
doesn't.
but if we felt that to have groups of people with common interests, such as the meeting we had last Thursday night with Public Works, we picked up maybe 4 comments which have been baked into this.
Right, that makes
And
total
the
sense.
6 suggestions you all have, we all have, will be baked in.
Yeah.
And we'll get a chance to review it. My
And
approach was, just as we did a couple of months ago, rather than have a meeting to go over, we sent out for everybody to do their individual work, and we benefited from that, but it wasn't a committee meeting, it was individuals working on it. I envisioned doing the same thing at this time. Maybe we won't.
So-
Maybe we will have another meeting.
Now, the next process is, because even though this is a draft, after the election, the most current copy of the matrix areas of and entities or scope of the RTM, which means what you're supposed to do, is the title of whatever that document is, will be sent to all of the members of the RTM, as well as whatever the latest stage of this is listed as a draft. So, because we can still, at that time, work with the draft, we will have met with virtually all of the members. We missed PZ&H on Thursday, they were the same time, and we just, this new website had me miss who's meeting on what. And education, but I've spoken to Ed Wishecker, and so he's gonna do it, on that. But yeah, we wanna have more control, because I do think when you get everybody from Public Works and they're reading Public Works and they're understanding how that's going. When you get F&B, they're reading what F&B is saying, or Park and Rec, and that's how they raise it. And quite honestly, after every one of these meetings, we've had additions and deletions. which is good, because, you know, I don't know about you, but even with my glasses, after you read a document 10 times, it's good for a new pair of eyes to say, why is that in there? Similar to, why do we have the meeting in here when we
All right,
just
so
say-
let's,
Are we required to have a public hearing on this? This is
Yeah,
not,
it's a code.
okay, all right.
if it was charter, then we want.
I didn't think so, thanks.
So then it agreed that as soon as we have we have a couple more committee meetings to go through, as we've mentioned, and as soon as those are baked into it, we'll distribute it and have a meeting to then confirm the current draft at that time.
And that won't take
Is
place
that
till after
agreeable?
the election.
David?
That won't take place till after the election, is that correct?
Maybe before. Matters how quickly we get everything else done.
Okay.
I don't,
That was just a
I don't-
question. That wasn't
if-
going to affect anything.
in order to give to be fair to town council, I would like to get it done as expeditiously as possible.
Agree.
And that's what's driving me. I joke about cleaning my desk of it, but no, we do need to get it right. And it will survive for 10 years, and then another crowd will come in and change it around again.
Right.
So, but at least we'd like it to last 10 years.
Well, if
All right,
we're
so we
good, we
got-
have it
I-
for 30
we're well
years based
safe.
upon what they did.
You got me on your page for that. Fine, I'm on that page. Before we adjourn, there's a topic here called other new business. What I'm gonna bring up is not new business, it's just an announcement that we will be working, the TGS&A will be working with public health and safety on the noise ordinance. And what I would like to do is to call for volunteers to participate in the preliminary work. It's not a subcommittee, it's not a commission, it is not official, but anybody would like to volunteer to help do some R&D on other towns' sound ordinances, interview the chief of police, get ready to interview the chief of police, the chairman of some of the managers of some of the karting companies, the public health and the Department of Health, and any of the particular people who will be involved in the development of the noise ordinance. In partnering with Public Health and Safety, Mac Patrick, the current chair, and I am current chair here, Mac and I would like to do preliminary work to get the material ready for when it officially becomes a topic that the new committees can work on. We'll have volunteers for TGS&A next year will meet, they'll elect the chairman, and that chairman will be responsible for moving the topic along. It should resemble the work that we did for the bag ordinance, where back then, Public Works had the public hearing and collected a lot of information of what was appropriate in the town, and TGS&A, as some of you remember, had to hammer out the verbiage on it. And it was a good partnership, so I think I keep referring to Mac Patrick, the then chairman of that committee, and the then chairman of this committee will have a lot of joint meetings. I should note that we hear reference to a public hearing, and a public hearing is optional, because if we were changing the town charter, they would have to have. But since the noise ordinance, it just is just that, it's an ordinance, and it can be handled because it changed the town code. Having a public hearing is a courtesy and an opportunity to get input on a topic which everybody has an opinion on. And what has to be added is to codify those opinions and make it a rule for the town. Is there any other new business that?
Well,
we
I want to
should
add
consider?
two other things to it. First of all, my understanding is the noise ordinance needs to be approved by the state.
I'm sorry, news ordinance what?
No, the noise ordinance needs to be approved by the state before it becomes.
See, there's so many variables on it.
Should be on our committee.
What? No, I found that out from Kate. Because FME, when they
Thank you,
said-
Jack, for that observation. We're not there yet.
But the other thing is that this committee will be involved. There was a request to have a waiver of certain personal property fees associated with it, which the town currently doesn't have. And they'd like to have it in June. So I've been in communication with Frank. We're gonna try and set something up with a couple members of F&B, Kate, Jen, Tony Hamicki, and take a look at that. And then the term that we used to use is then throw it over the wall to Tgs&A, but pretty much outlined saying this is what we want, and then that would have to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, possibly the Board of Finance, I'm not sure on that, and then the RTM. But if we back up from, what I asked Frank is, how soon does it become effective? So if it's 60 days and they want it by June because it's based upon a July 1st billing, and you want to give 30 days contingency, so that says that during the time of budget, we're going to have to figure this out. So that's something else that's coming down the road to you guys. But if we do a good job, then we should have most of the wordsmithing there, that you're not at a noise ordinance.
So, volunteers who would like to get a little head start on the noise ordinance, please let me know, because there's a lot of things to do to get ready. Now, at this point in the meeting, if we had not agreed to have another meeting this year, I would have thanked you all for your service this year. But I'm not going to do it because the year's not over. But it goes without saying that you all have been really constructive and helpful in the comments that you sent in early on, and even this evening. It's good. It's what we do. If there's no other further business, would someone propose a motion that we adjourn?
Yes.
Duly noted. Seconded. I love the way Seth says, would everyone who is in favor, please stand. Okay, and thank you to 79 and John, our friend John. End of service, John, thank you.
Just by the way, something else that just came up, when we talked about it. You know how Seth